It's now time for another keynote session on purpose-driven companies. This keynote will be addressed by Alexander Robertson, Chief Marketing Officer, ACG World. Over to you, sir.
Thanks so much. I appreciate the introduction. It's great to be here, and thank you so much for the invitation. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, sir, we can.
Audio is all right. Do you have the presentation, or am I going to operate it my side? Will you operate it that side, or you'll bring it up? Excellent. Okay, thank you. So let me just give you a little bit of background about me. My name is Alex Robertson, as the introduction says. I'm originally from South Africa, where I was born and spent most of my working life, but I have spent time living and working in the US, in the UK, all across Africa. And over the last 3 years, I've been in India, except for a short time during COVID where we went back to South Africa, but we're back in Mumbai at the moment. And my career really started in the world of agencies. And I'm not sure how many of you are from the business side of marketing or from the agency side, but my career started in agency, and I made the crossover to working on the business side when I joined ACG. ACG are a business which supports the manufacture of pharmaceuticals. It's a 60-year-old company, still a family-run business, but we really are becoming a truly global multinational now. And as such, we really focused on positioning this business as a true global multinational. Now, much of my work working in branding agencies in the past, I worked for many of the WPP companies, and I really honed my skills on working on brand positioning and brand strategy and brand narratives. And coincidentally, ACG was a client of mine, and we worked on a fantastic brand positioning, and ultimately they offered me the position to come client side and help run their marketing department. So it's been quite a journey for me, and really a fantastic opportunity to be on the other side of the boardroom table. Because in agencies, you really need to shift hats across different clients. And what I always envied about the marketers was they could really go deep and wide and immerse themselves in their business, in understanding their business. And today I'm here to talk a little bit about purpose. I was glad to hear purpose was one of the topics of the discussion when I logged in about 10 minutes ago. And there were many themes that come up that I believe are so important in building a strong brand and ultimately strong companies. Of course, there's a difference between a brand and a company. Many people think because they have a logo, they're a brand. But it's, as most of us will know, the logo is really just a representation of a company. The brand is the mental and emotional associations that we have when we see that logo. And how do people feel about your company? And today we're going to talk about purpose and really look at some companies that have done it right and some companies that probably haven't done it right, and explore how we can really help build brands and companies of purpose. So that's the theme. If we can go to the next slide. I want to start with a question, which is, what is it that all influential people have in common? When one is talking about purpose, it's really quite a human idea, this idea of purpose. And I think it's so important to look at it through the lens of how people have purpose, to understand how great companies can have purpose too. So what is it that all influential people have in common? And if we go to the next slide, it's really a belief, a purpose, and a character that is consistently expressed. So I'll explain briefly. The belief is there's a problem in the world. The purpose is I'm here to help fix that problem. That's my purpose. The fact that I am here to do something meaningful and solve a problem, that gives me purpose. How do I execute it? That's my character. And if I do that consistently, that's how great brands grow. And that's how great brands become known and gain traction and loyalty and with their customers. So very simply, it's a belief, purpose, and character that's consistently expressed. Now, if we go to the next slide, we see this so much through people. I spoke about this idea of it being a human thing. And if you think about it, the greatest brands and perhaps the clearest brands in the world are often people. We could take Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison, and he came out with one message, which was reconciliation. He took a country, a nation of people who were divided and torn apart, and he had one message of forgiveness and reconciliation. And with that consistency of character and with that one purposeful message, he managed to reunite a nation that had been torn, take it 10 years into the future of healing, and he managed to inspire the world and created great affection and loyalty around who he was. Mahatma Gandhi, someone that is equally a great icon in the world, had this purpose of ahimsa, which is really about nonviolence. I don't need to explain that to any of you. I'm sure you can tell me a lot more about it, but really Mahatma Gandhi was an icon, and his message, his way, his character, the way he did everything, it didn't matter whether he was meeting rural villages in India or whether he was meeting the Queen of England, the way he portrayed himself and put himself out into the world, and his belief in how he conducted himself and carried himself really helped to create the nation of India and unify this nation. Mother Teresa, another great icon from India, was all about unconditional love. It didn't matter if a child had no hope, she would hold that child until its last breath, just to ensure that every orphan that came into her, across her threshold into her orphanage, felt love, and everything was so self-sacrificial. Martin Luther King spoke about or had this purpose of emancipation, creating equal rights for people that had been oppressed and marginalized. And in a time long before social media, that belief, that purpose, that vision of what the world could look like inspired 1 million people to come out and hear him speak and march with him. And he didn't stand on the end of a podium and say, I have a plan and these are all the things we're going to do. He actually painted a vision of what the world could be like. And he said, I have a dream. And that was what inspired people and effected great change. So on the next slide, I want to just look at this word purpose. We understand that purpose can be something that really attracts people and motivates people. But what does it actually mean, and how do we relate it to business? Purpose is the reason for which something is done or created, or for which something exists. Now, that's not about making money. It's about we are creating something to solve a problem for people or for the world, to make the world a better place, to make people's lives a little bit better in any which way. They also say that purpose is a person's sense or resolve or determination. And I love that idea that purpose is something that's far more human. We looked at people of purpose. And this is really personifying this idea. And I think one of the challenges with businesses and companies and brands in the world is they think like a boardroom full of shareholders, not like people. And what's so important is to really think about the personification of our brands and our companies. And we can learn a lot from the great brands who are people. On the next slide, I'm sure you all know Simon Sinek. Simon Sinek has done a lot of thought leadership and thinking around this idea. He's a great brand thought leader, and everyone here, no doubt, knows him. But he came with this concept of the golden circle, which says every company knows what they do. Some companies know how they do it, but very few companies know why they do it. And even fewer know how to tell that to the world. So really the why is our purpose. Why do we do what we do? Why do we get out of bed? And if we can find that, and if we can articulate that into a compelling narrative that's also true, that becomes very powerful for businesses and brands. As he says, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And he gives great case studies around brands like Apple, who, if you ask us what Apple is, most people will say Apple's a computer company. But they sell phones and watches and credit cards and music and software and hardware and speakers and all sorts of things. And if you take another computer company like Dell, for example, we couldn't imagine buying a watch from Dell. That's just crazy. You'd never buy a watch from a computer company, but you buy a watch from Apple. And that's because we don't fall in love, and we're not inspired by the products that Apple makes. We're inspired by the purpose that they have in the world to make people's lives beautifully connected through beautifully designed and simple technology. And that's what people subscribe to, and that's what motivates us to want to follow and be a part of that community. And that's why people queue around the block to buy Apple products. So on the next slide, we see this in many business leaders. We spoke about Apple, Steve Jobs. So much of how we feel about Apple is through the personification of Steve Jobs. His vision, what he tried to do and achieve in the world, is the thing that we really resonate with and inspires us. The Tata brand, an incredible brand in India, a brand I've gotten to know so much better since I've been here. But quite incredibly, when Tata put their logo on a product, people just trust it implicitly. And that's because of the legacy of the people and the family and the integrity around which that company conducts itself and does business. And that's a consistent thing. Elon Musk, we all know Elon Musk, who tells us a story of a bright new future, whether it be through transforming transportation through green energy with Tesla, or finding new frontiers with SpaceX. And Oprah Winfrey is another great example, who's really built an incredible brand around internal reflection, mindfulness, and everything she does really supports that idea of self-growth. And there are many, many more. We could look at Richard Branson, Coco Chanel, and there are dozens more. On the next slide, not all influential people have a famous person at the core of their business or their brand. And how do they do it? So there are some fantastic examples of this. Red Bull, if you go to the next slide, is a great example. Red Bull exists. Their purpose in the world is to inspire us and to push us beyond our limits. And through their communication and marketing, they don't talk about the benefits of their product. They associate themselves with being pushed beyond one's limits. So everything they do, all the marketing spend that they spend is done bringing to life that purpose, visualizing that purpose for their customers all over the world. And what greater expression than taking someone to the outer limits of the atmosphere and getting them to free fall back down to earth. They conceived that, they paid for that, and they brought that to the world. And to this day, Red Bull is by far the most valuable energy drink in the category. No one comes close. On the next slide, another thing that's super important is that they do this consistently. Consistency in this belief, purpose, and character in delivering that to the world is absolutely key. And it's something Red Bull do brilliantly. In fact, they take this belief so far that they don't just sponsor these events, they own them. They don't sponsor a Formula One team, they own it. They don't sponsor all these extreme events, they actually create them, own them as a platform, and are able to use them to show the world how strongly they believe in their purpose. On the next on the next slide are some examples of other brands with great purpose. I'm sure we know them all. Nike has the slogan of just do it, but actually its purpose is about inspiring the greatness of the athlete in all of us. It doesn't matter whether you're Serena Williams, match points, center court, about to win your next Wimbledon title. When they say just do it, they want us to feel the inspiration, the greatness of the athlete that can achieve the goal they set out to achieve. Or whether you're a 150 kilogram couch potato who needs to get up off your ass, run around the block to save your life, when they say just do it, they want to inspire the greatness of the athlete in all of us to achieve our goals. IBM has been using the slogan of Smarter Planet and different iterations of that for many years, and their narrative is so much around this idea that all the technology, all the people are focused on contributing to building a smarter planet, smarter people, smarter technology, and a smarter world. Red Bull, we spoke about them giving you wings, pushing beyond the limits. And Johnson & Johnson is also a wonderful case study of a brand that has amazing stories and amazing products and amazing integrity in how they conduct themselves. And their purpose is really positioned quite beautifully in this line: for all that you love. And it's interesting that these purpose statements, either these positioning statements or the purpose, is very often an emotional connect. It's very much a human story. And I think that's key and important. On the next slide, this is how great brands do it. And many people can talk the talk, but can you walk the walk? And that's where the rubber hits the road. And that's the job we've got to do as marketers and branders and communicators, is we are the custodians of these companies. We are actually the persona and the personality that goes out into the world and expresses and gives experiences to customers of what kind of persona our brand is. On the next slide is a very infamous brand disaster, company disaster, where a company got this wrong. They had a whole lot of talk, but they couldn't walk the walk. And we all know the story of the oil spill in 2010 in the Gulf of Mexico. 10 years prior to this, BP got on the bandwagon of renewable energy and green energy and told a wonderful story, an incredibly compelling story about how they were committed to transforming their business of energy beyond petroleum. And in fact, they suggested that the name had evolved from British Petroleum to Beyond Petroleum. BP stood for Beyond Petroleum now. And all their marketing and advertising and rebranding and everything was focused on this idea that we are committed to this idea and this ideal. The truth is, to date, they've never spent more than, in fact, they've never even reached 5% of their revenue committed to exploring renewable energies. And for most part, it's been much, much less than that. Anyway, the oil spill happened in 2010, and their CEO, who was Tony Hayward, was a gaffe machine, and really just handled the situation so terribly for a company that had positioned itself as being a future thinking company, a company that cared about the world. Firstly, they tried to cover it up. Then they tried to say, well, it happened, but it wasn't really our fault. It was other people's fault. And then they tried to say, it's not so bad. You know, it's just a small spill if you compare it to all the water in the ocean. And through the middle of this crisis, he even went on holiday, racing his yacht in I think it must have been around the Mediterranean or something like that. And then he was also quoted as saying, and I think this was the final nail in the coffin for him, that you know, he appreciates that all these people have lost their livelihoods in the Gulf of Mexico through fishing or through whatever industries they are in that are affected by the oceans or the seas. But, you know, quite frankly, he would like his life back too. And all this media attention was getting a bit much for him. So it really just illustrated a company, a CEO that was totally misaligned to the story that it was telling. In stark contrast, the next case study I'd like to just briefly touch on is one from Johnson & Johnson. Johnson & Johnson had a brand called Tylenol. It's a paracetamol. It really was the market leader. It had, I believe, over 35% of the market share. But in 1982, there was a huge shock, mass recall of their products. And it was a decision that they made because 5, 6, 7 people, I believe, had died from taking Tylenol. And what they had found out was that people had tampered with the product, and it turned into an absolute huge PR disaster and nightmare. Overnight, their shares plummeted from 35% to 8%. And it really was a big problem. But they took decisive action, and they acted as a human being would act. They acted in a human way. And while the police were investigating the murders, they really got to work and took control of the situation. They ordered the immediate recall of 250,000 products all across America. It cost them $100 million. In fact, it was against the recommendation of the police and the FBI. They said, don't do it because it'll encourage copycats to bring big corporations to their knees. But they believed it was the right thing to do, and they wanted to gain the trust back from their customers. So they did it. They took off 250,000 bottles, cost them $100 million. They offered a reward for any information that would lead to the finding of the person who had done this. What had happened is someone had tampered with boxes in a pharmacy, and they'd put cyanide into these paracetamol capsules, and they managed to find out where it actually came from, but they never did find the killer. The next thing they did was they re-engineered the packaging with all these safety precautions, from the box to the lid to the bottle. They created 3 new tamper-proof safety precautions. They communicated it to everyone, to the public, through media campaigns. They told people what they were doing. They offered people, bring back your Tylenol products. We will give you an alternate product free of charge. They sent out communication specialists in every state across America to go and communicate to the health fraternities and explain to them what had happened. Thousands of communicators went out to regain the trust of people. And within 6 months, they had regained their market share, and within a year, they were basically back to normal and have stayed in that pole position ever since. And they credit this decisive action to one thing. The company had a credo, which was established in 1943 by the then CEO of Johnson & Johnson. And that credo essentially was their purpose. And it started with these lines. If you go to the next slide, what they've done is they've actually etched this credo in stone in their reception halls in their buildings. And it's something that connects the business throughout the world. And the credo started with these lines, which were, we believe our first responsibility is to the patients, doctors, nurses, mothers and fathers, and all others who use our products and services. The credo is very long, and it goes on to cover their belief around looking after their employees, their belief around looking after their communities, and lastly, their belief about looking after their shareholders. Our final responsibility is to our stockholders. Business must make a sound profit. We must experiment with new ideas. Research must be carried on, innovative programs developed, investment made for the future, and mistakes paid for. The equipment must be purchased, new facilities provided, and new products launched. Reserves must be created to provide for adverse times. When we operate according to these principles, the stockholders should realize a fair return. Not great returns, not returns at any cost, but a fair return. This is a company that managed a situation with integrity, and I believe it did it because it acted in a human way. It knew the persona of its brand, of its company, it knew the ethos, and it was able to react decisively. And this holds true for great companies all over the world. The next slide just really is highlighting the point that as a company, when we think in a human way and we try and do good and do purposeful things in the world, that really can be good for our business. That decisive action has become a global case study for Tylenol, and really a situation that seemed like a disaster became a little blip on the radar in their history because they managed it so well. There's one last case study. I don't know if we have time. It's one from Nike. It's a little video which I thought I'd play you. It's 2 minutes long. If we have time, we can play it. If not,
burning Nike shoes.
Nike is running straight into a political controversy.
People are so angry they're burning their own shoes.
Colin Kaepernick refused to stand during the national anthem, taking a knee to protest police brutality.
Nike revealed Colin Kaepernick as the face of its latest marketing campaign.
Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything.
Is Nike taking a risk?
I think they're taking a stand.
Tonight, the first game of the new season, and Nike is running an ad featuring Colin Kaepernick.
If people say your dreams are crazy, good. Stay that way.
Most of this country was talking about this last night at their dinner table.
And I'm never buying another Nike product again.
Nike's stock today dropping 3%.
Who's going to win this cultural showdown of standing for the anthem? We are.
Check this out. I went out today and bought me some Nike stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I want to applaud Nike. Speak up. We're right behind you.
This thing is bigger than just the United States, and I think it resonates throughout the world.
Kaepernick asegura que es
Just do it.
Nike stock reached an all-time high last Friday. I'm going to buy more Nikes now.
Nike's on the right side of history.
So don't ask if your dreams are crazy. Ask if they're crazy enough.
Okay, that's it. Thank you very much for your time. I think that's a little story around the importance of purpose. Just ending on a quote from Jim Stegall, who wrote a book called Grow. In short, businesses are only as strong now as their brands, and nothing else offers business leaders so much potential leverage. That's why I believe every business leader, whether you are selling cars, chemicals, cosmetics, needs to think and act like a brand leader. And brands are becoming so much more human. And I think where brand and business meet is where great success happens. So thank you very much for your time. I don't know if there's time for questions, probably not, but appreciate everyone's time and being here today. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, sir. That was a really insightful presentation. Thank you so much.